Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? During our lives, consciously and unconsciously, we spend an awful lot of time and energy developing skills and coping strategies for handling life and the situations that we anticipate that life is going to throw our way. But what happens when these aren't working for us anymore? What if they're actually holding us back? And the best thing to do would be to let go of them. What do we do then? How do we handle life now? And that's what I wanted to talk about in this video. And it was funny. It was originally inspired, and I wrote down a note probably over a year ago to talk about the player that wants to roll for it because they invested in the skill, talking about role-playing games. But this applies to life, the more I thought about it. Because, as children, we start to develop coping strategies for dealing with the world. And we learn about the adults and the world around us, and we come up with these strategies and these behaviors, and we learn to predict the actions of the people around us, and we do things that we're going to elicit positive responses. We learn that way. We develop our coping strategies. Later on, we find things that interest us, and we start to develop skills that might be useful, not only socially, but in the real world, in a job. Go into plastics, son. Maybe somebody tells you go do something because this will be a useful skill, and maybe it's just something that interests you. And so we spend time getting good at stuff. But what happens all of a sudden when these things aren't working? Maybe they never worked, but for the most part, we pick things that seem to work at the time. But as time goes on, all of a sudden we find ourselves challenged by these situations where these familiar skills, these familiar reactions and coping strategies, they're not as relevant anymore. They're really comfortable. They're the first things in our tool bag that we can pull out. But a lot of times the tool we find in our hand is not relevant to the task at hand. But it's hard to let go of those things because they're so comfortable, they're so familiar. And, in a role-playing game, well, we have an out. We can talk to a game master and say, hey, you know what, I invested in this skill, and if depending on the social contract of your table, the GM might alter the imagined situation to make the skill that you invested in relevant. That's a whole different discussion that I don't want to go down that rabbit hole of bringing the right character to the game and player error and not understanding what might be helpful here, in this imagined scenario. We have that out though. In a role-playing game, we can make those adjustments. In real life, we don't have a game master we can talk to and say, hey, this isn't really working for me. I invested my time, my energy into dealing with life this way. Can we change this? That's not going to happen. I hate to tell you that, but that's not going to happen. So, reality doesn't have to cooperate with what we want. And, we can spend a lot of time and waste a lot of time trying to find a situation that matches our old strategies. And this could be simply in picking the same people or the same situations over again or the same jobs. Or if we're in music and, I know a lot of people that are still stuck in hair metal. And they're still stuck in musical styles and techniques that are no longer as popular or as relevant. And I'm not saying they're not fun to play, but very often, thunder. Very often, they're clinging on to old strategies and sometimes just old techniques when there's a whole variety of techniques that would be more appropriate to the style of music they're playing. When you're playing jazz or when you're playing country, there's a different way to approach the bass. And very often, if I play in a country band, I have to completely change my bass playing to fit that style of music. But if I didn't pay attention, I could have brought the wrong tools and the wrong skills to those gigs, and I wouldn't sound as good. The band wouldn't sound as good. You know what I mean? So, but very often we're wasting time. Saying, well, I've invested in these skills. This is how I handle life. I need to find a situation that does that. What if our strategies don't work anymore? And what if really the approach that we need to start taking is, maybe I need to adjust what I'm doing. May need to learn new skills. And, growth often comes from trying something new and adapting. It doesn't necessarily mean all the time we have to abandon our old skills, but those can be a base that we can work off of. Other times, they're simply not relevant. And this happens more often in the way we handle and navigate life. One of the tenets of recovery, one of the things that we start to discover in the steps of recovery is there's a number of ways that we've navigated life that maybe they worked for us for a while, but they have since gone from being adaptive behaviors, keeping us alive, keeping us mentally protected and emotionally protected, to being very maladaptive. And instead of protecting us, they're producing very bad results. and they're causing havoc in our lives, in the lives of those around us. And it's time to let go of those defects of character, if you will, and to try something different, try navigating life a different way, which is not easy, because once again, those are the first tools in the toolbox. But we start to get this honest assessment, like, the way I'm handling life is not always working. Sometimes it's far less dramatic than that, and you're in a situation where you're 57 and you've noticed that the world has changed, and the things I did for years, like work as a wage slave, work for other people, that's not working for me anymore, man. I need to do something different if I'm going to be satisfied. Your story may vary widely from mine. It doesn't matter. I think at various times we all find ourselves in these positions where we realize, what? I'm constantly picking up these tools. I'm constantly using these skills or wanting these skills to be relevant, and I need to start doing something different. And that's not comfortable, but I think that's where the real growth is. And, you have to remember, like, your time wasn't wasted learning different skills or, the coping strategies that you came with. Like, that shaped who you are. These are skills or ways of handling life that, made you who you are and that you can build on. And because, once again, the older we get, the more experience we have. And so it doesn't mean they're completely irrelevant or, that all your time was wasted. That's the wrong way to look at it. You have experience. Sometimes you have experience in what doesn't work, but sometimes you have experience in where this works and where this doesn't work. And believe me, that's valuable too. Just because a tool doesn't work in every situation doesn't mean you throw it out of your toolbox. You just don't bring out the hammer unless there's the nail. But the real strength is still in building some new strategies and expanding on those, not just clinging on to the old ones stubbornly and hoping that magically a game master is going to show up for real life and change things to your liking. So you get to use that jump skill again, And I believe that the people and the players in role-playing games and the musical players, the people that adapt, whatever you're doing, whatever floats your boat, people that adapt and are able to continue changing throughout life are the ones that get the most out of it. They're the ones that live the richest and fullest real situations and imagined situations, because we're able to accept the fact that, life is a continuous process of change and of growth, and that even though it's uncomfortable picking up a new skill, even though it's uncomfortable handling life in a new way, where we're just not that good at it. Let's be honest. When you're starting to do something, you're just not that good at it. Not being afraid to suck at it for a while, not being afraid to make mistakes, go down blind roads for a second, have to turn around, all that stuff. At the end of the day, if we're brave enough to do that, and believe me, I have to remind myself of this all the time. If we're brave enough to do that, then I believe that we end up benefiting from it. The worst thing that happens is we invest in something and find out, what? I don't really like this one. This one's not really working for me. We can still leave in the toolbox. I've got some brake tools downstairs. I don't know if anybody's ever used brake tools to fix drum brakes. I haven't thrown them away because who knows? Maybe I'll run into some drum brakes one day. And those are tough tools to find. So anyhow, those are my thoughts for today. But more lightning and thunder. Cool. But, if you like that, watch some more of the channel. Watch these videos. Hit like and subscribe. Do all that good stuff. Take it easy, kids.